Alright guys, welcome back to Strong Successful Male. So for today, I'm going to go over an article titled, Men are now more likely to be single than women. It's not a good sign. Actually it is. And guys, this article is written by a woman, and she's going to go through this whole article trying to pretty much make it out that it's a bad thing that more and more guys are single. But she's going to go into her reasons why so many guys are single on the basis of it about lack of college education, less guys going to college, less guys making more money, things like that, and making it out to be in a way like it's going to be a problem for guys. Well, in actuality, we all know, no, it's not. The real problem it's going to be is for, wait for it, women. And that's the reason why she's doing this article, obviously to help women, because women want guys with status, and they figure with college, that's status, and with a college education, they're going to make more money, even though, wait for it, they may make more money in terms of salary, but guess what, in terms of their costs for student loans, nobody ever factors that in. So I'm going to go through this here, guys, and you'll be able to read between the lines and see a little more what I'm talking about here. But it's pretty funny whenever these articles are written for the better, to help guys out. They're really not. It's to help women out. So it starts off, it says here, almost a third of adult single men live with a parent. Single men are much more likely to be unemployed, financially fragile, and to lack a college degree than those with a partner. So right then and there in the first sentence, or a couple of sentences, she's trashing guys. More likely to be unemployed, financially fragile, blah, blah, blah. Now, adult males, that's 18 and up. When she's saying adult, people might think, oh, 30s, 40s. 18 is technically a legal adult here in the United States. So let's keep that in mind. And this is really blowing things out of proportion in my opinion. They're also likely to have lower median earnings. Single men earn less in 2019 than in 1990, even adjusting for inflation. Single women, meanwhile, earn the same as they did 30 years ago, but those with partners have increased their earnings by 50%. Translation, those that got married and were living happily ever after, well, then things were different with their earnings. Well, let's talk about this real quick. More guys are not going to college because they realize it's not worth it because of the expense of student loans. So maybe they're earning less, so to speak, but they're not going to have these expensive loans to pay back over decades compared to guys that go to college and oftentimes get worthless degrees, and they're paying for something for 10, 20, 30 years sometimes. Better, in my opinion, as I've stated before, to have a good trade, good solid job that you have no giant expensive student loans every month compared to being weighed down by them. You got to look at all the costs, but women don't look at that a lot. Again, because the college degree is status. Can't stress that enough. It says here, these are some of the findings of a new Pew Research analysis of 2019 data on the growing gap between American adults who live with a partner and those who do not. While the study is less about the effect of marriage and more about the effect that changing economic circumstances have had on marriage, it sheds light on some unexpected outcomes on shifts in the labor market. Over the same time period that the fortunes of single people have fallen, the study shows that the proportion of American adults who live with a significant other, be it a spouse or unmarried partner, also declined substantially. In 1990, about 71% of folks from the ages of 25 to 54, which are considered the prime working years, had a partner they were married to or lived with. In 2019, only 62% did. So, more and more people, well, let me phrase that, more and more guys are choosing not to get married. You can see this all the time in the articles I do, and less people are choosing to get married, or they're waiting longer in life, or guess what, they're not moving in with a girlfriend or partner, whatever you want to call it. And I always say that's a good thing. I think you're out of your damn mind moving in with a girl. I've talked about this countless times. I don't need to go over my reasons. And the idea always is, well, you move in together, you can save on rent, electric bill, food, whatever, and that may be true. But the other costs that come into the picture are way greater, in my opinion. And of course, it's the same deal with marriage. Oh, you get married, you can split all the costs and blah, blah, blah. That may be true. But then there's all the other costs. At the end of the day, we know who benefits from the marriage the most. Women, obviously. And again, remember, guys don't need to have a whole lot to live comfortably. We don't spend money like women do. It's the women that generally want the big houses to show off, the fancy cars to show off, the kids that go to private school to show off, the clothes, the jewelry, the shoes, the handbags, the expensive vacations to show off. Because remember, women don't have friends, they have rivals. Men don't need to do all that bullshit. Doesn't mean all. But most men don't need to spend as much money as the gals do. And don't get me wrong, there are some women that are actually good with money. I know a few. but they also happen to be in the financial banking line of work, so that's important to them. But anyhow, getting off track here. It continues. Partly, this is because people are taking longer to establish that relationship. The median age of marriage is creeping up, and while now more people live together than before, that has not matched the numbers of people who are staying single. Imagine that. More people are choosing to stay single. I wonder where that idea came from. But it's not just an age shift. The number of older single people is also much higher than it was in 1990, from a quarter of 40 to 54-year-olds to almost a third by 2019. And among those 40 to 54-year-olds, 1 in 5 men live with a parent. Now, again, is it because of the times? Is it because of maybe jobs? I don't know about the men living with a parent. But then again, we also live in a society, unfortunately, for decades now, thanks to the feminist movement, that you have more single-parent households because of the ease to get a divorce and the whole single mom thing being promoted. So you got more men being raised by single moms. And let's be honest here, without that strong male influence, they're less likely to embrace their true nature of being driven for purpose, goal-oriented, all that. They're encouraged more to be more on the feminine side of things, of relationships and bonding and all that type of thing. While the girls have been encouraged to go for their ambitions, their goals, their purpose. Hence, more going to college, the better paying jobs, the high position in companies. Not an accident. While the boys, less attention to us. This is why boys need a strong male role model. If it's not a father, it's a grandfather, uncle, older brother, somebody to help them along. So it's no surprise you get some guys living with their parents. This is one of the reasons I do what I do, to help young guys out. Give them a good verbal kick in the ass every now and again if I have to. The trend has not had an equal impact across all sectors of society. The Pew study, which uses information from the 2019 American Community Survey, notes that men are now more likely to be single than women. Aha! Which was not the case 30 years ago. It says here, African American people are much more likely to be single, 59%, than any other race. And African American women, 62%, are the most likely to be single than any sector. It says Asian people, 29%, are the least likely to be single, followed by whites, 33%, and Latinos, 38%. Interesting. Most researchers agree that the trend lines showing that fewer people are getting married and that those who do are increasingly better off financially have a lot more to do with the effect of wealth and education on marriage than vice versa. People who are financially stable are just much more likely to find and attract a partner. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, somebody's doing well financially. They have what is known to be a decent paying job and making decent money and all that and have built up some wealth. It's not going to be too hard to find somebody that's looking for that compared to somebody else that is maybe not making as much money and so forth. Because at the end of the day, like when it comes to women, of course they're going to want a guy with status who has a job that's considered to be making good money and all that. That's not hard to figure out. It says here, it's not that marriage is making people be richer than it used to be. It's that marriage is becoming an increasingly elite institution, so that people are increasingly only getting married if they already have economic advantages. Says Philip Cohen, a professor of sociology at the University of Maryland, College Park. He says marriages does not make people change their social class. It doesn't make people change their economic race, and those things are very big predictors of economic outcomes. And if they try to sell the idea that, well, okay, if you get married, then you're going to do well financially than anybody else. Again, you may save in terms of like you're both living in the same house, so you split the mortgage, electric bill, cable bill, all that. But remember, who are the ones that usually spend the money? So you could have both parties, both the husband and wife, let's say they both work, they both make darn good incomes. But since Americans are known by and large to spend a hell of a lot of money, and the women like to obviously compete, bigger house, fancier cars, expensive vacations, I can go on, I already have already. Are they really making more at the end of the day compared to single people that may not make as much, but they spend less? Not to mention those two people probably have very expensive student loans nowadays, especially they are probably in their 30s or maybe 40s. You got to look at all the things in the equation, guys. This reframing of the issue may explain why fewer men than women find partners, even though men are more likely to be looking for one. The economic pressures of men are stronger. Research has shown that the ability to provide financially is still a more prized asset in men than in women, although the trend is shifting. Translation, men are the providers. We've always been providers, or always want to be providers. But things are shifting, yeah. Thanks to the feminist movement, oh, he can stay home, be a stay-at-home dad. He can be a Mr. Mom. What could go wrong? Well, we know. Some studies go so far as to suggest that the 30-year decrease in the rate of coupling can be attributed largely to global trade and the 30-year decrease in the number of stable, well-paying jobs for American men that it brought with it. There's some truth to that, but you learn to adapt. You have to. When manufacturing moved overseas, non-college educated men found it more difficult to make a living and thus more difficult to attract a partner and raise a family. Okay, that definitely happened, but guess what? Life went on. Guys found other ways to make a living. That's what happened. You got to learn to adapt. You know, I believe in nature, to survive, it's not always the strongest, it's not the smartest, it's the species that's able to adapt the quickest to change. That's why, guys, you always got to keep your eyes open and see what's going on in the world, to pay attention when you have to adapt to something new. But there's also evidence that coupling up improves the economic fortunes of couples, both men and women. It's not that they only have to pay one rent or buy one refrigerator, says some sociologists who study marriage. It's that having a partner suggests having a future. There's a way in which marriage makes men more responsible, and that makes them better workers, says University of Virginia sociology professor W. Bradford Wilcox, pointing to a Harvard study that suggests that single men are more likely than married men to leave a job before finding another. Yeah, well, I think there's truth to that. I mean, if you obviously are married and you got kids and you got mouths to feed and keep a roof over their heads, you're going to be a little more careful. You may not just go quit a job before you have another one lined up. Some single guys, they don't have to worry about that as much, especially if they have got good savings and all that. Okay. There's also evidence that the decline in marriage is not just all about being wealthy enough to afford it. Since 1990, women have graduated college in far higher numbers than men. That is true, too. I've been reading articles. I did one recently. It seems like now the numbers are 60% women, 40% men going to schools. And again, the women they've been really chasing after the women for a couple decades to go to school. Well, they've left the boys alone. But also, men are realizing, hey, it's not worth it. It's not worth having these giant loans for something that's not going to justify the expense. I'm all for education, guys, but the right kind of education to justify the expense of doing so. There are plenty of good trades out there. There's always going to be a demand for. Just the other day, I had to have guys come to my condo and take care of a plumbing problem. Okay? And believe me, if you can't have the water running properly or the toilet to flush, it doesn't make a difference how bad the economy is or how good it is. Those jobs are going to be in demand. Okay? Those guys they got a good check from me for the work they had to do. In good times or bad, you need guys like that, always, amongst many other things. There are good alternatives to college. You may not make as much as the guys at college education, but I guarantee the two guys that came to my condo the other day, I guarantee the odds are that they do not have expensive any kind of degrees or any other expenses related to their training. Anyway. Says the BA versus the non-BA gap has grown tremendously on lots of things, in terms of income, in terms of marital status, in terms of cultural markers and tastes, says Cohen. It's become a sharper issue over time, and I think it's part of what we see in regards to marriage. If you want to lock yourself in a room with somebody for 50 years, you might want to have the same level of education, just have more in common with them. That sounds pretty scary. You lock yourself in a room with somebody for 50 years. Obviously, he's referring to marriage. It sounds like a prison sentence, but we know there. Wilcox agrees you get women who are relatively liberal, having gone to college, and men who are relatively conservative, still living in a working class world, and that can kind of create a political and cultural divide that makes it harder for people to connect romantically as well. I love how they always talk about how, well, educated people tend to be more liberal, and then pretty much saying that uneducated people are more conservative. Define education. Gaining education through life experience and teaching yourself, or college educated. Because let's be honest, most colleges are going to have much more liberal professors and promote these liberal things and so forth. Doesn't mean that, therefore, if you're stupid, you're more conservative. Believe me, I know some very educated people that are quite conservative. Not in an asshole kind of way, but definitely are more conservative. And I also know people that are quite college educated and have no common sense. They're dumb as a bag of hammers, and yet they're quite liberal. And are terrible with money, I might add. Anyway, what seems to be clear is that the path to marriage increasingly runs through college. While the figures on single men's declining economic fortunes are the most sobering, they are not what surprise the reporters' authors the most. Let me say that again. They are not what surprise the report's authors the most. It's quite startling how much the partnered women have now outpaced single women, says Richard Fry, a senior researcher at the Pew Research Center. About 43% of partnered women have completed at least a bachelor's degree compared to a third of single women. He speculates that women may be going to college in greater numbers because it helps them attract a partner in the same way it helps men. Not only are they rewarded in the labor market with higher earnings, but increasingly, partner also depends on educational attainment. So the idea, okay, everybody go to school, and therefore then your dreams will come true and find the right person. Well, you could have all these women go to college, and they're still going to be walking around not being able to find a guy because, again, women are so picky nowadays. They can meet a guy, he could do very well financially, own his own business, good trade, but if he doesn't have that degree, he's not good enough. Meanwhile, they'll go for a guy that may have a degree, and but he may be up to his eyeballs of student loans or make less than the guy that has the trade. But I've seen the reports, I've seen the studies, and by the way, guys, I read an article, I wish I saved it, how companies now are starting to hire people that don't have college degrees, that they just happen to be pretty good at things. No kidding. I got to look that up. I got to find it. I'll do it if I can find it. But yeah, and obviously people that spent the money to go to school aren't exactly happy about this because they're like, wait a second. They're hiring these people without the college degrees, and they can just go in and pretty much, they have certain skills they've learned, and they'll learn other things on the job. But for me, they went to school, and I got to pay these student loans. What the hell? Well, there you go. But anyhow, guys, thought it'd be interesting to cover there. But again, was this written to help out guys? No. This is written because women are worried. Because they want to have, obviously, more guys go to college and be more educated and all that, and obviously make more money, and therefore they can find partners because at the end of the day, I don't care how much a girl is riding the carousel or on her purpose, becoming a career woman, ultimately one day, they want a ring in that finger. They want to be a Mrs. Somebody at least once so they can, have their wedding, get their special attention, and that way show that they aren't just that girl that every guy wants to hook up with. There is some dude out there that at least once wants to settle with them. And I think that's what the real motive behind that article was. But yes, less guys are interested in getting married, moving in with their girl, all that. And there's a whole lot of reasons, which we all know why that is, but obviously not mentioning that in this article. So anyway, guys, that was a good one to cover. That is it for today. Be sure to comment down below, let me know what you think about this, and be sure to like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe. And I'll catch you next time.